All right, Holding My Soul, take one. See if I can get through this. Okay, so a little setup on this story. This story happened to me when I was a mercenary in Nicaragua. I was actually in Honduras, and we'd cross into Nicaragua and do some fighting. Okay, we were working with the Contra rebels at the time, and I was working on the East Coast with the Misuras. And the Missouri is an acronym for Mosquito, Suma, and Rama. Those are three tribes that made up the Missouri Nation. Okay, the Sumas had pretty much all gotten wiped out by the communists at the time. There weren't too many of them left, and it was kind of interesting. We would have to talk from English to Spanish, Spanish to Mosquito, Mosquito to Rama, Rama to Suma. I mean, it was like the old game you used to play telephone. You always wondered if the guy at the end of the line even knew what the mission was, you know. So, but we made through it, and we got stuff done. So. This story, like I said, needs a little setup. I had just gotten back from a mission, or we had gotten back from a mission, our team, and we had been across into Nicaragua for, I guess about 8 days at that point. Came back, and the time that this story happened was early morning. The sun was up and everything, so the sun had risen. We'd gotten up and gotten something to eat, and we were on our way down to an area where there were some dugout canoes in the Rio Coco. And for those that don't know, the Coco River, or the Rio Coco, is the natural boundary between Nicaragua to the south and Honduras to the north. So we were on the northern side, but when you're in the river and you're going upriver or downriver, if there's Nicaraguan soldiers there and you're in the river and you're not Nicaraguan soldiers and you're dressed in military, you're pretty much fair game. So going up and down the river was kind of a sketchy thing in a dugout canoe. And there was no motors on these things. They just had poles, and they would take the poles and they would kind of do one of these numbers and pull us up the river, because we were going upriver at this point. It wasn't a fast-moving river, so that wasn't an issue. But let me tell you, 32 hours in a dugout canoe was straight. I mean, we stopped at one point to get something to eat and then got right back in. But yeah, it was a little rough. So we were on our way over an embankment, which is about 25, maybe 30 feet down to the river, and they had in the side of the hill, they had dug out steps so you could get up the river and you weren't sliding in the muddy bankment, you know. So I was a little nervous about going down the river, going down the embankment, because I was afraid with all the military gear I had on and everything that I'd probably tumble down and stuff. I was a pretty sure-footed individual, but it was kind of sketchy going down this thing, you know. I could see if you were a native and you had nothing on but, you know, your clothes, and you're heading down to the river to go fishing or something. It was a little different than having all this gear on you and stuff and being top heavy with a rucksack and all, you know. So at the time, the team had already gone over the edge, and I was told I was the tail gunner at that point. So I was to hang back and make sure everything was clear, and then when they were all in the dugout canoes, they'd call for me, and then I'd come scampering down and jump into one of the canoes, and off we would go. And these canoes, if I may sidetrack a little bit, these canoes are pretty interesting because they had a lot of mahogany. So we were in this beautiful mahogany dugout canoe. It was, gosh, I mean, if you could get one of those here, they'd be worth, you know, a fortune, you know, all the mahogany wood they had out there in the forest. But anyways, so I digress. So I was left on top of the embankment, and there was probably between the tree line and the edge of the embankment where I had to go down, was probably about, well, I want to say about 30, maybe 35 feet. So I hung back in the bushes a little bit, and then as everybody went down over the hill, I came out of the tree line and was standing kind of in that open area. And that was fine. There was nothing tactically wrong with that. I got a better view of what was going on the other side of the river that way. I could see if there was somebody over there that was thinking about doing harm to the team. But I didn't want to silhouette myself right on the edge of the embankment, so I hung back enough that I wasn't silhouetting myself too bad. And all of a sudden I noticed some movement to my left. So being that I just got back from a combat mission, I had an M16 at the time. I raised my M16 and I brought it up, and I was just like, whoa, because immediately I acquired a target, which was a young female, maybe early 20s. She was very young, and she was suckling her child. And I was like, oh gosh, that's embarrassing. You know, she's feeding her kid. She got a kid in her arms up to her left boob there, you know. And I looked for a minute, but something was wrong. And I kept looking over there and looking over there, and she looked at me, and man, she made eye contact with me, and we locked eyes. And you know, there's an old saying that the eyes are the window to the soul. And I got to tell you, she crawled right down in my soul and grabbed hold of my heart and just ripped a big hole in it. I could see in her eyes she was just hating me, and she didn't need to speak a word. She told me with her eyes that she hated me. She hated me, she hated all the soldiers, she hated everybody because of what was going on. She hated the war, she hated the fact she was stuck in a refugee camp. The village we were at was one of the worst villages we'd been in, and she was there. The conditions were deplorable. There was little food. It was just, we had a name for that village, which I won't say here in public because I want to keep this PG, but it was crap village anyways. But yeah, but man, she just like crawled right into me and got inside my head real hard, more than I think any person really ever has in my life. And I couldn't understand the hate and animosity I could see in her eyes towards me and stuff, you know. And I was looking at her, and it just wasn't registering. Something was wrong with the picture, and I couldn't quite figure it out. And then I looked at her baby, and she had a baby in her arms, and she was kind of swaying back and forth, holding her baby like a mom would do while she's feeding it and stuff. And I looked, and man, that baby was as gray and as dead as could be, you know. And poor little kid, the arms were just sitting there hanging out, and the legs were hanging off and just kind of flapping as the mother was moving left to right. And then I realized why she hated me so much. And she was still trying to suckle her baby, who had passed recently. Rigor mortis hadn't set in. But she was hating me. She was hating every soldier. She was hating everything about the war and everything, you know. And it would just kind of hit me of, yeah, here's some consequence to what we're doing, you know. And I looked at her, and I was trying to tell her back with my eyes. I must have had some puppy dog eyes, because it was damn near bringing me, you know, here I am, a hardcore mercenary soldier, and it was tearing me up, you know. And I looked at her, and I just tried to tell her by looking at her, you know, and I had tunnel vision. I just remember there was nothing there but me and her, and she might have been 20, 25 yards away from me, but she might as well have been right in my face, you know. And she kept looking at me, and I kept looking at her, and I kept trying to apologize with my eyes, if that makes any sense, and just tell her, hey, I'm sorry, you know, we're trying to free our country so stuff like this won't happen, you know. You know, we've heard so many stories about the communists coming in and killing the villagers and stuff. And, you know, one of my best friends that was down there was an indigenous guy. He was, I think it was Mosquito, and from the Mosquito tribe. And they had killed his father. They had raped his mother and his sister in front of him. He was hiding in the bushes or under the hut, and they hung his mother and sister in a tree, and they'd cut off their breasts and desecrated their bodies. And so, I mean, so it was stuff like that. I had no doubt I was on the right side when you're trying to, you know, battle that kind of evil, you know. So anybody that thinks socialism and communism is great and all that, well, here's the end result. I was seeing it face to face, okay? So I'm not going to get real political about this, but I'm definitely anti-communist, okay? With good reason. So, and that whole situation in my life, I mean, I still think about that girl. I still have dreams about her. I mean, it's been, what, 30 years? 1985? What's that, 30 some odd years from now? I mean, it's 2019 right now, and I still think about that girl, and she still rips a hole in my heart, and just tore out a chunk of my soul I don't think I'll ever get back, you know? So, so fast forward, so what are the consequences when you see something like that as a soldier? You know, you can say, okay, well, you got PTSD and this and that, and which is probably true, but so what are the consequences? Well, recently I went to a Christmas party with my family, and my sister was talking about her duck. All right, now she's got a duck that's got a problem. I guess when ducks make love, their private parts come out, they do their deed, and they're supposed to retract back in. But her duck's private parts weren't retracting back in. And I saw her duck one day walking along, and his private parts were flapping around and stuff. And for some reason, it just reminded me of that kid and that baby in those mother's arms with its arms just flapping, just left to right. She was swaying, trying to feed this kid that was dead. She wasn't giving up that kid. She wasn't giving up the ghost on it, you know. And my sister was talking about it, and I got real cross with her and told her basically to shut up and stop talking about it. And nobody understood exactly why I was getting so upset. So I ended up just kind of ruining Christmas and being an ass, and I left. But so there's some of the consequences when you go to war and stuff like that. A lot of regular civilians don't understand. They just don't get it, you know. you know, maybe me here telling somebody, maybe people understand a little better, and maybe hopefully a vet will open up instead of capping themselves. You know, there's so much suicide from veterans. It's just mind-boggling. You know, why we don't take care of our vets better than what we do is beyond me. You know, but anyway, so yeah, so that's my story called "Hole in My Soul," and that's just one story. I've got some of the other ones I got aren't so dire and dark, but all right, so that's the end of this one.